Hello and welcome to Right Hive's conference in 2023. My name is Courtney Herring. I am a vocal coach for singers and speakers as well as an author. This is the panel on POW, writing superhero fiction, and I am super excited to be here today. I am joined by Patrick Dugan, Cristina Jurado, Matthew Phillion, Stefanie Contreras, and Liam Quane. And we are thrilled to be talking about this topic. I'm thrilled that I was given this topic. I'm such a geek and I'm so into this. I'm so excited. So I'm going to start with the first question, and I can either go in order, but I have a feeling that everyone's going to be ready to jump in. So jump in and we'll go from there. All right. So question number one, which I think is most important. How does superhero fiction differ from paranormal, sci-fi, urban fantasy, etc.?
I always think of it as the kitchen sink genre, because we get to play with all the toys. All those other ones have sort of more close parameters to make sense, and we're writing in the only genre where you can have aliens next to wizards, next to robots, and it's totally okay. It makes perfect sense, right? Like we get to break more rules than everybody else. That's what I would say is the biggest difference from.
Okay.
I would add to that, it's kind of like depending on maybe the author's vibe. I remember when I was reading the Shatter Me series by Tahiti Mafi, like it is not maybe marketed as a superhero story, but when you read it, it actually kind of is. So it's couched in that sort of dystopian YA fiction, but in my mind, it can really be all of those things. Superhero fiction could be hidden in any of those, but for authors who maybe want it to be at the forefront or the main theme of their story, maybe that's how they would market it.
It's funny because when I was reading this question, I interpreted it in a different way. I don't know. I thought that what we were talking about was like, what is the difference between superheroes in a paranormal or in sci-fi or in hero and fantasy? And I was thinking, well, it depends on, the story, obviously, because you have superheroes in any genre and sometimes in all of them together, a little bit as Stefanie and Matthew kind of hinted. And for me, it was always, it depends on whatever the author wants to kind of like stress. If it's something about society, tends to go more towards science fiction, not always, but mainly. If it's more about individual, issues, it goes more into horror kind of thingy. And then fantasy goes into everything. So for me, it was kind of, this is the way I interpret it. I'm sorry if I took it in a different direction.
No, I think that was very interesting. A good way of looking at it. Liam, I think you were going to say something.
No, that was a good way of looking at it, because I enjoy those type of perspective, like that type of perspective, because I'm a politic person, so I look at the politics of the story, and I think the thing that separates the superhero genre from anything else is really a sense of determined morality. Like good and bad is put out there as, and it's answered. The question's kind of answered usually. It's only the handful of deconstructionist ones that don't, but I still think that's the main, like the X factor that separates.
Yeah, I think it's how you coach your book. My Darkest Storm trilogy is dystopian in nature, and people have powers, so it's borderline superhero. I think some people go, the Marvel route, and they do more traditional, capes and suits and all sorts of stuff. Which kind of, to Matthew's point, breaks all the rules. You can just do whatever you want. So it's a fun genre to write in.
Actually, for my series, each one kind of fits a different theme too, and that's the fun part about writing superheroes. Is this one's the horror book, and this one is the urban fantasy book, and this is the alien invasion book, and like we get to, like I said originally, is like we get to play with all the toys, so you can kind of you're not as locked in as you are in some other genres that draw a similar fan base.
Yeah, we've done a panel before, haven't we, Matthew? And I did look at your series, and I that was one of the things I found interesting, because I was looking at it going, wow, this could be one giant tome, but how on earth do you write so much? like so quickly. It's just like like it was a 5 or 6.
5 in spin-offs. There's 5 in the main
5 in
series and a
spin-offs,
bunch
yeah.
of spin-offs, yeah.
Yeah, and I was looking at them all and I was just going, yeah, I'll buy them, but oh, that's daunting. That's brilliant.
Awesome. Okay, so then this is kind of a two-part question, and I think it's definitely probably my favorite question to ask. How do you choose your superhero's power? So I know that that might narrow it down a little bit more to more like kind of traditional superheroes where they have a superpower, spidey sense or whatever it is that they have. But then the one that's going to follow that up is how do you determine their kryptonite or their Achilles heel? So those are you can answer them together, you can answer them separate, but those are the next two questions I have.
Yeah, can I rush into this one?
Yes.
Is that okay? Thank you. This was one of my favorite things to do with the book, with Road to Juno. My story is because it's not your typical superhero story. It's so superhero that adjacent that, well, this is like kind of a C tier spoiler, but there's literally another universe pops up where the characters are all superheroes in that universe, but like it's looked at from the perspective of our characters who don't necessarily live that way, because I wanted to make them more human. And to me, I think the first thing any human would do if they got superpowers, especially the ones that my characters have, sorry, they would do personal errands first, and that would take years. Like a lot of the time, like you see in the old comics, people used to get powers and then 4 panels later they'd be stopping a bank robbery in a costume, which is nice for serialized like stories, but because I wanted to deconstruct and ground mine, I decided to have them freak out a little bit. The fact that they are I tried to make the most powerful characters in fiction, so their powers are essentially come from wish fulfillment, but they don't know yet. They're experimenting with them. It's about a superpowered family who go to war with a cosmic god to stop World War III from happening for a second time. Is time travel. They can fly. They can survive in space. They can walk on the sun. They can fly through black holes without getting damage. And the interest and weakness to have that was their human brains, what their human minds could come up with, how they could. Their weakness is basically how can they take this wish fulfillment power, this power fantasy, and how can they apply it properly? How can they do it without making mistakes? And when you've got 4 characters going at each other with those powers, it becomes very interesting, because one of them could pick up a building and hit the other one with it like it's a baseball bat, and the other one could turn it to snow before it even touches them, and then another one could stop the spin of the earth and time, and then have everything. It was really interesting just to have this all-out power fantasy, and I think the weakness was their humanity and their human limitations.
All right. Okay. I like that their weakness is basically the human failing, right? Yeah. Interesting. Anyone else?
I was always interested in this topic because of a book that I read when I was very young by José Saramago, which is a Portuguese Nobel Prize, and it's called The Gospel by Jesus Christ. And it's basically the story of Jesus Christ, but from another point of view, where he doesn't really want to be the Messiah, but he's forced into it, kind of. And I thought that was kind of very provocative for me. So when I write stories, superhero stories, which is more and more what I'm doing, like I started with short stories and now I'm doing it fixed up. I am interested in a little bit what Leon was talking about the toll that takes into the person, because in the case of the characters I write, they got powers. They don't know how they got them. It's kind of like, sometimes I think I like to think about them as kind of like kind of transhuman or post-human, like something in between God and a human. So like an advancement on a human kind of thing. So as if you have like a Pikachu that is advancing into another, right? Into another character. So that kind of thing. And for me, it's the everything that comes with their powers. It comes with a cost for them, because all the responsibility and everything that the society asks them, it's really damaging to them. So I always think that their kryptonite is their own powers, because the more they do what they do, the worse they feel. And I always write them. I wrote a story called Instructions to Create a God, where they, with a religious group, really wants to create God. And they try, and after a few iterations, many iterations, they find out this perfect being. But the perfect being, when he realizes God, he's not interested in doing any godly thing, and leaves. So it's kind of like the perfect, slap in the face. So I always think that, I kind of think like people with this, like with high IQ and high capacities, they sometimes they are not understood by the rest of society. So I always try to think that my superheroes think that and feel like that way. Like, it's not that glamorous at all. As a matter of fact, is very damaging towards, your personality.
Yeah. Again, I love that it's built into the fact that they're human, or in your case, sometimes they're beyond human, but somewhere between God and human. Interesting. Anyone else?
So mine is, I always laugh that it's set after The Boys on the Amazon show. So mine is set in a world where superpowers have been outlawed, and all kids are tested at 5 years old and moved to concentration type towns where they have to live within, and they have inhibitor collars. So the big thing for me when I was picking the powers was to pick powers that were flexible enough to be interesting, but not so powerful that eclipsed everything else. So and then finding ways to use the powers in a non-typical way, so that you weren't just like, oh, well, that's Spider-Man, oh, that's Superman, oh, that's, there's none of, I tried to mix and match the powers so that they work. Like, one of my characters is a techno geek, power. So he can do, he basically is a hacker on steroids. He can actually communicate with the machines. The downside to all my heroes is that it actually, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So one of my characters throws lightning, it literally burns his skin when he's doing it. So, there is a cost, in his case, a physical cost to using your powers, which makes it so, like, do I really want to throw lightning to turn off this light, because it's going to hurt. And so it's that kind of getting away from the super all powerful and making sure that my main goal was to make sure they were characters first, and then the powers were secondary, which in a lot of traditional superhero stuff, it's the powers and then they slap a name and a quick backstory on it, and you don't ever care about it. So I wanted to make sure my characters actually don't know what their powers are until the middle of the first book. So they've been raised, they don't know. So by doing that, you get to a much more connection with those characters, so that when they get powers, the powers are secondary to the story that they're telling.
Wow, I like that.
I ended up beta testing all of these different characters. I've been wanting to be a comic book writer since I was a little kid. So that, they get hundreds of characters, and I'm like, and by the time I got around to writing the Indestructibles, I was like, which ones get along the best? So I had like this whole like toy drawer full of characters, and I'm like, let me try this one, let's see which ones get along best. And it was almost at random, like, okay, this one seems to connect to that one, and they just felt right together. And I grew up I'm of the right age where superheroes were in that deconstructionist phase, like as I was reading them, and I kind of leaned all the way back into like hope punk territory. And rather than going dark, their main problem is they're all too responsible. Like their weakness is that they want to do the right thing. And I always joke around, like, none of these characters have a sense of self-preservation. they're all in therapy. That's the other thing. And there are no therapy scenes, like it's all private, but there's references like, that they're all in therapy because of what they're doing, but they're all it's that to the detriment of their own health, they want to do the right thing, and that's their Achilles heel, is that because none of them are perfect and none of them are invulnerable, is that what's going to get them in the end is that they're going to do something for everybody else and not make it out the other side. And that's always been the thing. And one of them has no powers. And she's actually the character that most people have the greatest number of readers have attached themselves to, is a person whose superpower is just not wanting to leave the world worse than she found it. So that's where I came from. Like it's I don't know how to write big powers. Like I get overwhelmed by too much strength in a character. So like they can get to this far, and then after that it's pain and fear, to get out the other side. So that's their Achilles heel. Then that's why that's why they'll have to go talk to someone after between missions to keep their heads on straight. So
All right. Stefanie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so for my story, The Merry Maids, it's more of a sci-fi glint, and the main character, her abilities are in telekinesis and movement. And the movement aspect, I think, is probably the first superpower that I stumbled upon. It's kind of like a mix of ballet and if you think of like the floor routine of gymnastics. So I just kind of pictured someone with that ability, but like breaking into something or using that for like cracking into a spaceship type of a scenario. And it grew from there. The main character in the story, she is on her first shipboard assignment. So she is young and inexperienced, and that's kind of her kryptonite in the beginning, is she's trying to figure out how she can use her abilities in a sort of reluctant hero mode. And then I'm currently working on a Latinx superhero story, a little bit more traditional superhero story. And the first brainstorm that I had for that story was, what if your best friend was a superhero and you knew they were putting their life on the line and you're really worried about them every day? Like, what would that scenario be like? And in that story, I think the kryptonite is more like, you have these abilities and you have to make some choices. Like, are you going to be good, bad, or morally gray? And where do you draw the line? So that's really the kryptonite, is that moral conundrum.
Wow. I love all of these. I love this. So the next question is, and I think it kind of ties into what some of you were saying. So the question is a little bit, I would say a little bit more cerebral. What are some tips for defining the rules for your superhero's power and universal expectations? For instance, do non-superheroes know that superheroes exist? Does every hero only have one superpower?
Oh.
So think on that one. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it's just delving more into what you all just kind of said about constructing powers and the weaknesses.
Yeah, most rating panels, the correct answer to everything is it depends.
yeah.
Because it really depends on your story and what you're trying to sell, to tell. Like for Liam, having these amazing, huge powers works well for his story. For mine, I have people who can, like, throw colored lights in the air, and that's their superpower. So it really comes down to a range of what do you want to tell versus, like, how big of a story are you telling? I can see a point where, you could be, a barista, using your superpowers to make sure that people get good coffee. It's, you really can gear your powers and everything up and down to match what kind of story you want to tell and which genre you're in.
Yeah,
But
I like that. Yeah, that's true. Sorry, the thing that I is this about like broad about the whole subject, or is it about personal things, like personal projects, or both?
I think both, however you want to answer.
Well, that was I did originally like plan on not doing. It was just a story about people who didn't know what they could do and finding out, and then it kind of drips through who knows and who doesn't know. And it's reflected in, because I was looking at the real life politics of, like, governmental politics, how in real life there doesn't seem to be many heroes really in real life. There's like, the odd group, like firefighters, doctors who aren't private practice. Sorry, I have to say that. That type of thing, where there's a lot of groups who are heroes really, but within, like, that's like society's ordered heroes to be these little small splinter groups, and then dog eat dog is kind of the thing that's put out there. And I wanted to have a look at that in the way that worked, the way people with power only looked at them through kind of, I don't want to say a selfish lens, but it's the a lot of people in real life don't make sacrifices for other people. They just don't, despite the fact that we've got like this overwhelming amount of superhero content. There's still horrific things that go on that there's about 50 witnesses to, and nobody does anything about it. And the reason why is obviously self-preservation, but it's even like in bigger political areas where it's like, in the way England's politics works compared to America's and other countries, specifically America's though, because we're very close, is we do the exact same thing as America, but we always have the exact opposite result. So there is a funny talking, colourful faced, as in he's white, but he's got a red face. He's got a very specific haircut, and he says a lot of incendiary things about people coming into the country, and with migrants and asylum seekers and stuff like that. He says some very bad things about them. You think I'd be talking about Donald Trump? I'm not. I'm talking about the leader of our, what amounts to being the Democratic Party of our country. And when he wins the election, because all the the news companies like him more than the others, so he's going to win. When he wins, everyone in my country is going to be cheering when our Donald Trump gets in. You see, and that's like kind of what we're told to aspire to, which is strange. And that's what I wanted to do with the book, and that's why I like superhero stories, is because they're a reminder not to, but only when they're well written. Like a lot of mainstream things don't seem to care about the hero part anymore. They like the super part. And you can see with reactions online to fandom, like fandom reactions and stuff, what they want. They want like monsters who don't kill people, and that's what they want as a superhero. And that's not what a superhero is. They help people. Like, so it's a bit skewed. Like, I don't know whether I've got anywhere near the question. I just needed to say.
Yeah. No, that's very, very interesting, and I loved a lot of that. Anyone else thoughts on defining the rules of your superpowers or your universe or the world building? I know it's a really broad question because, as you said, it's the kitchen sink, so you can put a superhero in 1920s.
What is really the difference?
Why not? Right?
What is the difference between a monster and a superhero? I mean, sometimes both of them have abilities, special abilities, but it's what they do with them, or if they work for the good or the evil. No, and as Matthew was saying earlier, now we are in a not now, but since a while, this deconstruction of what a superhero and their abilities and everything, we're getting more into blurred lines where you have very bad characters that then at the last minute they got a glimpse of redemption and they save the day, or the opposite, people who are the heroes, they become really despicable. And that's what kind of, in my opinion, it reflects very well society, and how a little bit what Leon was saying, that we are kind of thirsty for real heroes, even though we know they are out there. Because what is a superhero or a hero? For each of us, it may be something a little different depending on our cultures. Like, for example, me, I know in my country, we are mainly Catholic, and it comes from the superheroes on here come from the idea of saints, people with super morals and that no one can top up. And so they are extremely perfect, but that also, it's not what the maybe now it's kind of popular because nobody is perfect, and I don't think anybody really wants to be perfect, because that means to lose yourself and to lose a little bit of your personality. So I think it's really interesting this conversation between different cultural traditions. I see more and more other traditions, more just that the Anglo-Saxon coming into play, roles and bringing their own cultures into the mix, and giving us a sense of other types of seeing the world and what it means to be a hero or not a hero. For example, for me, I've used things that you will never think it's a superpower, like depression and mental illness. What if you had the ability to contagious, to transmit an acute depression to anybody you touch? You become the best weapon in the world, because you can make anybody commit suicide clean and easy, and nobody can trace it. But it's a horrible, horrible superpower to have. And not only that, they have to maintain you very depressed and, at the verge of being crazy. So I think that's a very cruel thing. And well, as you can see, I like twisted superpowers. But the thing is, I think that a little bit of that is kind of real. It's out there, the way sometimes our society works. And I would love to write very uplifting stories of superheroes, but I just come up with really dark ones. I don't know why.
I love bringing up that there's, people love these really dark heroes now, and my books are very hopeful. I'm really cynical. I am very cynical. But my books are where I find any hope in the world at all. And I'm kind of done with being a hero is hard.
Yeah.
And doing the right thing is hard. And I'm done with the guy who's a piece of garbage and then gets the redemption arc at the end. Because it's real hard to be a hero your whole journey through. And that's the journey I want to see characters on, is how do you stay the good guy when the world doesn't like you? The world doesn't like it doesn't like heroes. We nail them to crosses, you know what I mean? Like there's, good people get trampled by society.
Or different people.
Yeah,
or different.
Yeah. And so my setting parameters, the setting I have, everybody knows they exist and they keep failing, because each generation of superheroes fail because they get burnt out, because the world doesn't like good guys. And the very opening of the books is like, they didn't die, they gave up. And here's a bunch of kids that are going to try again and again and again and over again. And so, I mean, I'm just thinking of I won't call out the mainstream series, but where it's like people didn't understand that the bad guy was the bad guy. Like, oh, they've made him a bad guy. He's been a bad guy since the beginning, and nobody knew. And that actually worries me about society. So my hope is that in telling superhero stories like we do, that maybe we can tell people about how it is, how to leave the world better than we found it. That's the main thing. It doesn't matter if you're impervious and get powered by the sun, or you're some karate and you're trying to stop people from getting hurt in the street. The whole point of this genre that sets it apart from every other, I want the dark superheroes to be the outlier. That's the cynical, analytical, let's take a look at our genre and understand it better. But I think at the core, there's got to be some hope there. Because like Liam was saying, there aren't that many heroes in the world, and a lot of them disappoint us. People are way more likely, since we've seen in the past week, to open up their phone and videotape someone getting hurt than step in and help them. Happens every day, especially here in the States. But and so maybe it's our job as superhero authors to remind people that it's okay to be the good guy. You know, I gotta hop on my soapbox there, but like that's kind of, and I do love those dark stories. I love, you know, I've watched all the seasons of The Boys. I've, you know, like I love that stuff, but at the end of the day, I kind of want to, I don't want to be the one to telling the story that makes the world grimier than it was. I want to try to be a little bit of hope, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Stephanie or Patrick, or have thoughts, or I can move on to the next question.
I feel like my friends on the panel have covered it very eloquently, probably more eloquently than I can. So I would say ditto and move on.
No problem. I think this leads pretty well into this. How do you create your superheroes antagonists? So I think in some cases here that maybe what I'm hearing is some of these superheroes are kind of their own antagonists, or society is the antagonist. But I'm going to ask the question anyway and see where people land with that.
I mean,
We should let Stephanie start.
Yeah,
because
Stephanie,
she didn't have anything to say.
you should jump in first.
Stephanie, you're on the
Sure.
spot. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So for the Merry Maids, the antagonists essentially were coded into the people who were working against the main character's mission. So, you know, she's on this sort of intergalactic adventure, and the antagonists are the ones who are working against her in that format. And so they have a competing goal. They recognize what she's doing, and they're actively working against her and the other members of her crew so that they cannot succeed. In the work in progress, I have the antagonists are the ones who essentially created superheroes in that world, and they're trying to like not let the superheroes thrive and succeed. So basically, the antithesis of who they are is who the antagonists are.
Interesting. I like that. Very neat. Matthew, you want to go?
Sure.
We'll go this time.
I've always got this running joke of like, does capitalism have to be the bad guy again? But for most of the time, it's in every book, it's someone who's trying to take things away from it's the accumulation of power. The first one is it's a greedy corporation, or it's a conquering alien species that takes over, you know, takes away individual thoughts. It's a government agency that wants to control the superheroes in one of the books. It's always something about taking away the ability to be yourself. I think you know, it's always something. I wish I was better at making like a big a bad guy, you know what I mean, like the moo bad guy. Like, it's usually like some big nebulous entity that you know, that is, because we live in a world where people walk all over each other, you know, so it's like, that's the bad guy right there, the guy that's walking all over everybody, that's the bad guy. And now if we make him a superhero or a supervillain, or make them as a collective as supervillains, that's kind of where it's doing harm for personal gain, whoever that is always going to be the villain for me, I think.
Right. Interesting. I like that. Anyone else have any thoughts, or I can move on to the next question as well?
So, you know, my thing was I liked playing with the idea of taking the upper crust, the people with all the power, and dropping them to the bottom. So the superheroes go from being the saviors and the heroes to being the thing that is wrong with society. And, you know, they're basically stamped out and locked up to get rid of them. And so, you know, the main character is dealing with discrimination from society, but also, you know, the government uses them as the, you know, unfortunately, it's got too many real world applications, but the government uses them as to keep people in line, and they have a reality show called Saturday Night Showdown where they let the supers use their powers so that people can be reminded that these are dangerous people. And so it's all about using fear to control the populace. And so it's the story is really a look at, you know, how people who are being discriminated against or or kept down, how the things they have to overcome to get to just a place where they feel like they're safe. And that's kind of the 3-book series is following Tommy and his family as they're just trying to get to a place where they can be safe and just be normal people without being discriminated against. So I have and the thing is that there are this is after a brutal war, and so there is hurt feelings on all sides, and so the people who are now in charge of taking care of the super, keeping them in line, are the ones who have also lost families, because it starts off with somebody picks up a building and slams it into a bus and kills 85 people who had nothing to do with what was going on. It was two superheroes battling it out over something stupid. And so it takes that kind of whole trope and flips it over and says, okay, so what happens when the normal people get fed up with the superpowers? So basically, my main character is everything is the antagonist, including themselves, because even in their group, there's people who are like, we should just disappear. Our powers just lead to problems for other people, so let's just not involve ourselves in society.
Yeah, interesting.
I was just going to comment that for me, I realized thinking about your question, Courtney, that the villains in the stories that I write are always the people who employs and exploits the superpowers of my superheroes. So it's very interesting because it's the places that kind of take care of them, but also, as I say before, exploits them because they use them as mercenaries or for their own interests. So at the end, their own organizations are the villains that kind of end up fighting. And maybe that's kind of a metaphor about capitalism, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know whether is exactly that, or also, you have to think about, I live in the Middle East, and sometimes the only way to tackle certain issues is through fantasy and superhero stories, etc. As a matter of fact, I found out there's a Dina Mohammed. It's a young illustrator who does Tahira. It's a superhero in an abaya, in a black abaya, and covered, that actually helps women in distress or people in distress, weak people in distress, children or elders. And she has superpowers, and she's very vocal and very feminist. And I thought that was a kind of a fantastic way to use fantasy to bring up very important social issues that maybe in other ways it couldn't be raised. So I think sometimes the superheroes are the people who are willing to write or draw certain things that is risky in their own countries. And I just wanted to throw that idea because I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
Liam's comment earlier about you used the phrase power fantasy, and sometimes the power fantasy is actually being able to do something that you can't do in the real world, right? Like that's like that, where you're that artist is doing something to stand up for what they believe in through art. So that's really cool.
Courtney, is it okay if I jump in and give an answer, or do you want to?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't want to get too cringy or cheesy or whatever, but I genuinely feel like I was a worse person before I wrote a book. Like, it sounds silly, but like while I was working through the storyline, the novel, while I was breaking it down into, it was such like big elements into smaller elements, smaller pieces, like how the world works, how people work. I kind of was taught by everything. I was looking at all the research of what we are as people, what is good, what's bad, and how there seems to be a bit too much nuance when it comes to, like, there's not enough nuance in storytelling anymore, but I don't think that's a terrible thing anymore, because the more moral you get as a society, the more obvious crimes are going to be, if that makes sense. And I was kind of, I'm not I don't like conservatism. That's my thing. Not that you can't be conservative. You can be conservative if you want. It's just that there's a climate emergency around the corner, and if you don't like communism or nothing like that, you're pushing the human race towards it, because everyone's going to be living in little communes, trying to survive the hostile environments. So if you don't like communism, stop the climate emergency, and that'll be great. You won't get it. It'll be wonderful. I'm my villain is, well, because it takes place after World War III and during World War III. It was, soldiers aren't necessarily villainous in it. They are all told what to do, but there are some who do dark things, and it's commented on that. Yeah, every society has its psychos, because it's true. Every society does have its psychos. Or individualism. Like, I think that's another thing as well that I go against, where it's the sense of self versus the world rather than being part of the world. I don't like nihilism either, to a degree. One of the lines I cut from the book, actually, that was going to open it, but it didn't work with the opening, was going to be nihilism is for children. Just because I know we've gone past that kind of, doting sense of religion. There's a lot more people who aren't fixated on religion anymore, which, again, that's up to them. I'm not fixated on religion, but nihilism with no ending I don't like, because it's kind of used as an excuse for people to do. People say, like, well, I can do this, we're on a rock floating in space, and we're only alive for a certain amount of time. It's like, yeah, but you control the time you're alive in. It doesn't matter if there's no result. The relative scene you're in now, for the lack of a better word, is experienced. It's there, it's real. And so, like, it's like sitting in a filthy room and not cleaning and saying, well, it's just going to get filthy again. It's like, no, your health, it can affect your health. It's relative. There's a situation going on here, sort of. So that's why, and I mentioned conservatism, because it's kind of like stockpiling, and I don't like stockpiling, because, as I said, there's a climate emergency. I know I keep going on about Dawa subjects and stuff like that, and I do apologize. But I'm British, and it's always raining. That's us. But the actual villain of my story, which is going to be very long-winded, I'm afraid. Sorry, I'll cut it off short. It's a faceless humanoid, chrome-covered god who doesn't speak and exists in a prison of the past within a World War III setting, and it torments the main characters who originally defeated it, but because it was alive at one stage, it's still alive forever in that way. So it's kind of imprisoned, and then it gets a personality of its own. Then it comes to the real world, and, well, their world, the universe, and it, starts to kind of wants to get its way with everything. It doesn't want to be alone, but there's no one who can exist with it, because it's so powerful. And that is kind of, there's a lot more to it than that, but it goes in spoiler territory.
No, fascinating. I do love the pointing out of being British. Subject was just a great little laugh. No, that was so this is kind of flipping the tone here a little bit, if that's all right, which is, how do you ensure that a superhero doesn't become too cartoonish or over the top, assuming that is your goal, right? Because there are plenty of instances where someone might want to write something that is kind of more traditional comic, Matthew, if I may kind of refer to it that way. I mean, like the comics you grew up with, that are kind of the standards of the time, that kind of were the originals. Now things have gotten much darker, more complex, and have more nuance. But if you were if someone were to sit down to write superhero and they said, I really don't want it to be cartoonish, what would be your advice for that?
I think it's like any other a character. I don't like plain characters. I like multidimensional or tridimensional characters. In my opinion, to make a character not cartoonish, I try to make them a little contradictory. And, as any human being could be, I don't make them just perfectly good or perfectly bad. I like when they contradict themselves and change opinions and do something, but then they do something else. Not always, but I mean, I'm just talking here as if, my characters have no direction or anything, but within the context of their stories, I like them to go through what, any person could go. And I think it is very important to make them believable. And for me to add this contradiction kind of element helps to bring credibility to their character. I don't know whether you think I'm crazy or whatever.
No, not at all. Yeah.
I would say something very similar is I try to write the characters in a way that the reader will feel like they can walk in their shoes. And being able to do that, I think, helps make them a not cartoonish character. Although I do appreciate the cartoonish characters, but I don't think I could personally do it well or pull it off. So I will avoid it.
Coming out of a comic book background too, it really is a dividing line. You can look at stuff from like a while back and just see the dialogue and how it was what it was for the time. Like it was a little flat and it was a little silly, and it was like, and I think the genre for the past couple of decades, really the past like 30 years or so, has really kind of acknowledged that they're real, that you can write real people even if they're wearing spandex. It's totally cool. I just said, like, you can make cartoonish characters in romance books. You can make cartoonish characters in mysteries. It's all about just how you write as a writer. It doesn't matter what genre you're in. You can accidentally make someone cartoonish and unrealistic if that's how you're, what angle you're taking at. I just treat them like real people. They give them components that make them real people, and it'll happen for you, no matter what genre you're writing in.
Yeah, I agree with Matthew. It's all about, a lot of more cartoonish books there's a power attached to a person and not a person with a power. And I think that comes down to, if, people, even if you have superpowers, have real concerns outside of things that can be, as a parent, if your child is in danger, you're more worried about your child than you are about, like, something more esoteric. So I think the key is to make sure that you have a good character base and then apply the power, not pick a power and then just slap a cartoon, figure on top of them to make it cool, unless that is what the story you want to write. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of comic books that people love, and a lot of them are written exactly that way. I think now people look for a little bit more realism in their superhero fantasies. So I think that's part of what we've seen. But if you're trying to tell a real story, you need real characters.
Yeah, agreed. Mine, the Road to Juno is a very strange book because on the surface it's about dark things, but like it's got World War III, as I said. The cover's all like gold and dark blue, and it's space and vacuums and power fantasies and struggles and monsters, but there is a really big slapstick element to it. I enjoy slapstick humor. The main character, even though he finds out that he's a cosmic god, he gets called into work at his office by his boss, and he goes because his boss needs him to do his job, and he goes to do his job, and it turns out his boss is struggling with PTSD because of the war. His son died in the war. He can't get over it. He's got no family left, so he comes in to do the job, and his boss is drunk, and they're about to have a really big meeting with a Chinese client who owns a tech company who invested in prosthetics. Just during the war, they started up a prosthetic startup, and it goes from the boss asking the character for help and the character being annoyed that the boss is in such a state at such an important time, and then to make him feel better, he pats him on the shoulder, and then the boss goes through a wall, and then he has to pick the boss up and then kind of marionette him through like a puppet through the situation, through this negotiation, and then sit there as and not use his powers and let hope that everything can get solved in a negotiation in a business environment, while he's sitting there with the ability to like stop time and change things, change wherever. He has to be human in that moment, and that's slapstick. But the fluctuation of emotions that the character goes through, of blaming the boss for what he's like, and then making a rather large snafu of knocking him through a wall, and then he gets angry at the negotiator who's on the other business, who's doing the business negotiations, because of the tactics they use, and they're out to get each other because it's a business deal, but it's also a bit of a scrap. And I think that where it comes to it, like a fluctuation of emotions, it helps like define your character. Them trying to understand the situation around them is kind of what makes it less cartoonish. But I love cartoon humor though. Like I have a trend in my stories where I name coffee shops, and they're always ridiculous names. Like in my book, the coffee shop, it's a coffee shop. It's a normal coffee shop. It behaves like a normal coffee shop. At the people in the are barristers. The baristas do work the job, but it's called the Brown Fountain, and it's a euphemism for obviously excrement. And there's another one called Mark's Mud Hole. Like there's just silly things like that, but the way they operate is realistic. That makes sense. So there's a fine line between cartoonish and not cartoonish, but I think you have to just keep it to a minimum if you want to not make your story cartoonish. Don't name things silly. Don't give anything silly names. Don't have slapstick comedy. Don't have a kind of don't have a separated self in the book. Don't have your characters be separated from the story if you don't want it to be cartoonish. Have them living in the world as opposed to watching it unfold in front of them.
Yeah.
That make any sense?
Yes, it did. Have them be part of it, not just an observer. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I also like a good dose of like silly humor tossed in with like a lot of grief. I do a lot of comedy in really sad, difficult moments. And I'm not a dark person at all, but that came out a lot in my books. And I went, oh, apparently I like to laugh when I'm really sad, and want to make other people laugh. I'm looking at the time, so I want to be mindful of the time, but I would like to ask one question that's not on the list. It's a silly, fun one, I promise, which is, what is the first superhero you constructed, whether you were 5 making a comic book or your first book? And it does not need to be a character that you currently have or use. I'm just talking, kind of the first thing you constructed and played around with, whether it went anywhere or not. It can be your main character now. I'm just curious, like when I was a little girl and I like all I wanted, and to this day, actually, if I could fly, I would be pretty happy in life. I could go anywhere I want and whatever speed I want. If I could fly, that would be great. So I know when I was a little girl, I didn't necessarily create a character that could fly, but I wanted to be able to fly. So just curious if there's a superpower you wished you had, or what was the first superpower you created in your creative life? And I'll just start with Patrick and we'll go.
Mine is teleportation. Then I wouldn't have to deal with Charlotte traffic every day.
Yeah. Teleportation is
So, but ever since I was a kid, it's like no school bus, just pop to school.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot something. Pop home.
My dream of Genie style. Always wanted that. It was fun.
It was boom, done.
Yeah. Christina, what about you?
I'm gonna pick the one that I have in the first one I wanted when I was small, believe it or not. And not too small, but when I was growing up, and the one that is in one of my books, which is the ability to speak any language perfectly.
Yes. Yes. Also on
For
there.
obvious reasons.
Yes.
And mine that in my house we speak Spanish, English, French, and Arabic, so it's
Wow.
not far.
Wow. That's cool. It's just so cool. Liam, you're next on my screen.
That's fun. Then I'll try and be quick with this one. I was about 5 and I made a group called the Crystallizers. My mum come up with the name, and it was like a little hand-drawn-y, comic-y thing, and it was a group of people who find a lockbox that's full of crystals that turn them into kind of Power Rangers style people, and the crystals are from a dying planet, and the alien sent them away. It's kind of like Superman, the way it was ejected to Earth, and they find the crystals and work together to fight crime.
Awesome. Stefanie, what about you?
My first superhero was a mix of She-Ra, Princess of Power, and but like in Barbie clothes.
Yes, I love it. Oh my gosh, She-Ra must be before your era. Because she was because you're younger.
No.
And a She-Ra was when I was quite little. That's so cool. And Matthew, you can finish us out with this question.
It's funny that you bring this up because now I can't remember their names, but I know exactly in my office where the hand-drawn comics were that I drew when I was like 10. I'm going to pull them out after this call and remind myself of the names, because I haven't thought of it in years, but I made up a group of kids that were not particularly good at being superheroes, but did the best they could, which is what I end up doing as an adult. And I'd completely forgotten about that until you brought this up. And now I'm gonna, as soon as I'm off the line, I'm gonna be digging through my closet trying to remember their names and see if there's anything that carried forward through the id into the future. So
Oh, that's so fun.
yeah, that's funny. I know exactly which boxes they're in. I just haven't thought of them in ages and ages and ages. So
Well, I'm
We want to
excited.
see. You have to post them on your Twitter for us.
oh,
Yeah.
that I am absolutely I'm going to post them everywhere when I pull them out, because I was not. There's a reason why I'm a writer and not an artist. I'll tell you that much.
Oh,
I think that's across the board.
Yeah.
Did everyone else get into this because I wanted to tell a superhero story, but I can't draw a comic, so let
You
me do
got
the other. Okay, we're all on the same page.
yeah. Had someone told me when I was younger that comic books could be novelized and that I could read a comic book story instead of the medium, because the medium, I appreciate the medium. I think it's beautiful, but it's not necessarily something that really hooks me. I'm much more of a novel type person. I would have read
same.
a lot more comic stories had I been given that information. So bravo to moving into the writing world. Okay, so now's the time I'm going to let everybody, I'm going to go in reverse order what I just did and let everybody give shout outs to their current projects, where to find you on social media, or your newsletter signups, any freebies, calls to action, movements, projects, organizations, charities, anything of importance to you. And please, be specific and tell us where we can find you and all of those things. Matthew, I'll start with you.
Sure. I'm at MatthewPhillion.com, Matthew Phillion, most places on social media, except for Twitter and Instagram. I'm Matt Phillion because I made those before I wrote books. So I'm by my informal name there on those two. And I'm ever present if anybody ever wants to talk shop. I'm always up for chatting about writing. Only real thing to mention is a full cast audio version of my first book is coming out probably by the time this airs. I don't know. We're waiting for the final edits on the audio. So I get to play one of my own characters, which is great. So that's actually my big thrill of the year, is finally getting it into audio and having a full cast with different actors playing the different characters. So I'm super psyched about that. And by the time this airs, there will be pictures of my terrible drawings from when I was 10 or 12 years old, drawing comics all over my social media accounts. So come make fun of my childish sketches from back then.
Awesome. All right, Stefanie, where can we find you?
I am at Latina Geek Girl on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and my website is latinageekgirl.com. So you can find me and my books there. The Merry Maids is a completed sci-fi trilogy available on Amazon. I have a Dia de los Muertos short story in the Autumn Nights charity anthology, which benefits the Trevor Project. So you can find that on Amazon. And then I have a Vampire and Crow short story in Quill and Crow's anthology, Rituals and Grimoires, which is available on Amazon or on the Crow Shop.
Wonderful. Liam, what about you?
My name is Liam Quane, and I am a screenwriter and author, and you can find me on Twitter at name is at spec_arc, and I usually go by Liam Quane or Liam.Quane on anything else. The main site I hang out on is Vero, which is the separate app that isn't Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And my company's called Specificity Archives. My publisher is Beaten Track Publishing. And if I could just say one little tiny thing about the book, if anybody wants a story about, one of the biggest comic creators on the planet, I think one of the most famous ones, likes my book. They sent me a letter saying it was great, and it was just, that was a weird birthday present. And I'm not going to name them because that's kind of unethical, because it's not really endorsements, but it was one of those things where they don't write comics anymore, and it was kind of a dream come true just to have that acknowledgement. So if nobody wants to look, you don't have to. I've already got my acknowledgements, but it's just just look around, say hi if you want to, or if you don't have to. I'm not your father. It's okay.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
Cristina, what about you? Where can we find you or in your work?
Yeah, I am a bilingual author. I write mainly in Spanish, but also in English. And I was, believe it or not, the first female author who got the Ignotus Award, which is Spain's Hugos, for a novel. So it took many, many years for female authors to be recognized. I'm also a translator and promoter of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And you can find me on Twitter at DNA Set Project. My website is very long and in Spanish, but I'm going to say it anyhow. Másficciónqueciencia.com. But if you find me in Twitter, you'll find the rest. Actually, some of my stories are in Clarkesworld, Apex Magazine, and Strange Horizons, and in the Best of Science Fiction, Volume 1 by Head of Zeus, which is a British publisher. And I'm currently working on a webpage to feature short stories by Hispanic authors translated into English. It's going to be called Futura House. And we just wanted to make sure to bring attention to all the Spanish-speaking authors out there in the international market. My current project on superheroes is a fix-up, and it's called Limítrofes in Spanish, which can be kind of translated as borderliners, kind of. And it's a fixed up. So every chapter it's a story in itself. And as I mentioned earlier, it's about people with special abilities that are horrible and not necessarily physical, but mental. So I'm always very happy to talk to anybody. Please come and say hi on social media. I'll be looking forward to talk to all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Congrats on all of that. And Patrick, bringing us home.
All right, I'm patrickdugan.com or .net, sorry. You can find me, the easiest place is to go to linktree/PatrickDugan. That has links to everything I do, from my publishing company to my newsletter, where I've got a freebie that you can get, which is called Reaper, which is the origin story for one of the bad guys in the Darkest Storm trilogy. My newest release is Never Steal from Dragons, which is a cyberpunk fairy heist novel. So it just came out, and I've got 3 new books coming out this summer called the Shadowblade Chronicles, which is sword and sorcery fantasy.
Wonderful. I actually have a follow-up question for everybody here. When you have books that are published and they're on Amazon, or perhaps other locations as well. Would you prefer people buy them directly from Amazon, or would you prefer people buy them directly from you?
To me, it doesn't matter.
If there's no preference, or if there's no preference, that's fine. I just always like to ask an author if they would rather me get it from them or get it on Amazon. What's, you know, is it helpful to get more sales on Amazon? Is that one more sale beneficial, or would you rather, you know, sell it from your own home and sign it, or get more profits from that single book? Just
It
curious.
really comes down to you. A sale is a sale in my world. If you want a signed book, like I have a Square store that you can go out to and order signed books, so you can have them personalized for gifts and stuff. But you know, I just want to get my work into people's hands so they can enjoy it, and hopefully, you know, they read something and they want to read more of what I write.
Yeah.
I always say, feel no guilt buying it wherever you want to get it from. Like it doesn't, especially for smaller authors, it really doesn't hurt to go through one of the big distributors. We're just happy you're checking our stuff out, right? I think at the end of the day, we're happy you're enjoying our world. So I agree with Patrick. Whatever, a sale's a sale. So
Okay, I just like to ask that question.
Mine's a bit of a strange one because I have my feet in two different ponds, because there's the English releases are, you know, it's better to go to beatentrack.com, which is my publisher and editor's site for English people, but obviously there's logistical issues when it comes to American readers and Canadian readers and other you know, international readers. So you know, that is totally up to you. You can pirate the thing if you want to. I don't think it's popular enough to be on pirate sites, but you can do whatever you want. It would be nice to, you know, have, you know, readers. I've got more people to watch My Hero Academia than I have to, I think, buy my book, which I'm proud of, because everyone should watch that show, especially if you like superheroes. It's been decimating DC and Marvel for the past like decade. So just watch that. Buy my book first, but then watch that.
Got it. Well, thank you. I'm just to give people where to find me. I'm Courtney Herring. My website and online presence is currently being completely overhauled with some rebranding and messaging. So, but you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Discord as Court Skibop. That's Court Skibop. It's a nickname my husband gave me and it kind of stuck. But that's where you can find me on social. You can reach me at Courtney D. Herring. It's my whole name at gmail.com. If you're interested in any voice lessons, speaking, anything like that. I work with people doing audio dramas or reading their own audiobook, as well as singers, musical theater, all of that, rock, all of that. So it was so wonderful to meet all of you and do this awesome panel. I had such a great time. Thank you all for being here, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Courtney. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.